Hey everyone, welcome to the latest Phoenix Children's Live. I'm your host, Senior Brand Manager Peter Balistreri. Today we're going to be talking about Seasonal Affective Disorder, or SAD, and we may say SAD during the broadcast. But here to help me today is Dr. Joshua Kellison, who is a psychologist at Barrow Neurological Institute at Phoenix Children's Hospital.
That's right. Thank you, Peter. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Just a couple little quick things. As you know, we like to know that you're out there. Give us a like, give us a love, let us know that you're watching and that you are getting something off of today's broadcast. Ask questions. We love that during the broadcast or even afterwards. So our capable colleague Jenny Hagel over there will give us the questions if you give it to us during the broadcast. Otherwise, as I said, put them in the comments section below, and then we'll get to them as soon as we can. So first things first. Aloha wear today. I completely bombed, and I was going to wear some Aloha wear, so I am, my bad.
Peter, it's Aloha Friday.
I know.
What's going on?
I'm very sorry. So next time I do this with Dr. Kellison, you can hold me to a promise that I'm going to wear Aloha wear too. All right? Is
exactly.
That good?
I'll hold you to it.
All right. So Aloha wear is actually, that's my segue today. So we're talking about seasonal affective disorder, which is a real thing, and that's another thing we're going to talk about.
Yes.
Is it real? Is it not? But Aloha wear hopefully will get us off of the seasonal affective disorder. Maybe enjoy it today, get us a little excited as we're getting into the holidays.
Exactly.
So, but I'm going to let you talk about yourself a little bit first. So this is your first Phoenix Children's Live.
Yeah,
so
my first one.
Tell us about you and what you do.
So I actually graduated from Arizona State University with my PhD in clinical psychology. So go Red Sun Devils.
There you go. See, state-based.
And so I've actually was working here as a practicum student, learning how to do clinical psychology work. So therapy, those kinds of things. So I've been at Phoenix Children's as a practicum student like 3 or 4 years, and then I went off to Seattle Children's Hospital, University of Washington.
Another great hospital.
Oh yeah, great hospital. Yeah. A great place to do training. And then I went off to Honolulu at the VA over on Oahu Island.
I'm guessing that's where you started getting the Aloha wear.
It's part of the culture there, so it's just kind of what you can do.
Yeah.
And there I was able to get specific training for LGBT veterans and their health care and providing optimal care for our LGBT populations.
Excellent.
And now I'm here at PCH, and I was able to do program development for LGBT youth and families, as well as a DBT program for adolescents who have problems with self-harm or suicidal ideation or suicidal attempts. A specific program for them and their families. And then I run a LGBT youth and families support group on Monday evenings. So if you're interested in those kinds of things, also send a comment. We're able to answer those questions as well.
Exactly. Well, so you were in Seattle for a while.
Yep.
Not much sun there, so that's another good segue.
Yeah.
So you probably, did you deal with that when you were there, with seasonal affective disorder?
We did, and actually we had light boxes on our desks.
See?
In almost of all of our clinical rooms, we had a light box available for people that were affected by seasonal affective disorder.
All right, so let's talk about it. What is, so for someone that maybe has heard about it or just wants to know information, just let's start with the basics. What is seasonal affective disorder?
Well, so what it is it is not a formally recognized diagnosis. It's not in our diagnostical statistical manual that psychologists use to diagnose people, where it lists kind of various kinds of symptoms, and then we kind of make sure that people meet the criteria for a diagnosis, and then we're able to diagnose them with that.
Okay.
So seasonal affective disorder, when we think about it, is actually like a major depressive disorder, recurrent, meaning it keeps happening, it's cyclical, and that it's seasonal. So it's happening at specific times of the year. And for most people, it's in the winter time. And so what types of symptoms we might see for seasonal affective disorder or major depressive disorder with recurrent with seasonally is issues with fatigue, tiredness, lethargy, maybe increased or decreased appetite, but typically it's increased appetite, and it's usually for things like carbohydrates, sweets, those kinds of things.
And that works perfectly into the holiday time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right?
Yeah, and we can see this in nature too, if we think about bears going into hibernation. But so where people are affected by the amount of sunlight that we have. So basically, they also have irritability, issues of motivation, maybe pulling away from friends and family, not enjoying as much of their previously enjoyed activities. It's a fancy word called anhedonia, where we just kind of no longer interested in things that we previously enjoyed.
Kind of just like a general malaise, basically.
Yeah. Or maybe I used to love cooking, and now I just don't find it as enjoyable anymore, and I just want to lay it down, and
So with that being said, I know, and so the big question probably will be asked of this is, okay, we're in Arizona, we get sun, 362 days a year, or whatever it happens. How can someone be affected by seasonal affective disorder when you're living in a state like Arizona?
That's such a great question, because we have the same kind of question in Hawaii.
Right.
So when we think about it, it's actually the length of time that we have in the winter. So like yesterday was the shortest day of the year.
That's right.
So we are affected by the amount of sunlight that we get through various systems in the body.
Okay.
So the melatonin, for example, it affects our ability to sleep and our wake cycles. That's what it contributes to.
Okay.
And when there's less sunlight exposure, then the melatonin production in our bodies goes up. So you're going to be feeling tired, you're going to be feeling fatigued, and for most people we actually do feel this way. What people might call wintertime blues or something like that.
The doldrums.
Yeah,
yeah.
Where I just want to lay down and watch Lifetime Hallmark movies, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And just eat some popcorn and
or those Rankin Bass claymations. That we all love those, right?
Yeah, I love it. And so that's the kinds of things that you might want to do when you're just not as affected. But people that have it where it's actually impacting their ability to live their lives as fully, so they're really feeling sad, they don't want to go to work, they're just not feeling well, that's where we can diagnose them with something. So it's impacting their ability to function. But here in the valley, we do have lots and lots of sun, but at the same time, we are affected by the winter cycle.
It's interesting, yeah, because you would just figure that if you were living in like Wisconsin, you know, the Midwest, where it gets dark at what, 2 in the afternoon. I'm being sarcastic because I'm actually from Wisconsin, so I know how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you would think that it would affect the people there more, but it's interesting because it is still a chemical kind of a thing. Right?
Yeah, because if you think about melatonin, it also impacts serotonin, which is a chemical in the body that really helps us to feel happiness and also our well-being. And so if we have less serotonin in our bodies and more melatonin, like you're going to feel tired, and also you're not going to feel as happy.
Okay.
Great mix, right, guys?
Right. So we're at Phoenix Children's Hospital. The keyword operative word is children. So does seasonal affective disorder affect children, or can it affect children?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think for our audience out there, I think we need to keep in mind that a lot of disorders such as major depressive disorder, anxiety, all the mood disorders really can affect children as well. People of all ages, older adults as well, which we can see. So when we think about that, if that is true, then therefore it must be true also that kids can also have it seasonally, and we do see that. And how would we see it manifest in children? Well, if we think about motivation for adults, it might be going to work or doing things around the house, yard work or whatever. For kids, it might be they're not in compliance with parental requests, so kids are being asked to do their homework and they don't want to.
You hear, my kids, did you hear that? See, maybe you're just being affected by seasonal affective disorder.
Maybe Dad needs to take you to Hawaii this week.
We'll see about that. We'll see about that. Don't listen to that. All right, but yes, I can understand that. So, or I just don't want to go to school.
I don't want to go to school.
Yeah.
Just feeling tired. And then so you might also see more crankiness or irritability. So if your kid already has those kinds of parts of their personality, you might see it increased. And like, well, why is that? Well, what is going on in the environment? Well, if we think about sometimes parents are maybe ineffective, they might be having depression or something. And so that's where we're talking about risk factors. But to go back to the original question, so yes, kids have it and they can be shown by low motivation, irritability, eating more or eating less. Sometimes they have difficulties with sleep, so they want to sleep more, those kinds of things. So they're taking lots of naps or wanting to nap. So
I guess as a parent, the other thing that, especially it's a good example for me, you know, when you have preteens, I think you just have a new teen.
Yeah.
So you got to have to kind of balance those between those preteen or teen tendencies where they want to start just, you know, they want to sleep and, you know, they're going through their hormonal changes and things like this. So, so that's, I guess, the hard part when a parent comes to you, you know, is it sad, seasonal affective disorder, or is it just my son or daughter is going through the normal changes that someone happens? And how do you determine, you know, when you're crossing over into one to the other?
Well, that's where you need to come see a psychologist, right? So we might have that belief that my kid might have some sort of disorder, anxiety or what have you, but that's where we come in. So we're able to provide families with questionnaires, we're able to provide children with the questions, similar questionnaires that they self-report, even teachers that can also report. So the idea here is it's not just impacting mom and dad's relationship with their kid, but it's also impacting at school, at work if the kid has a job, and other relationships. So that's when we think, okay, now it's actually something where it's not just one area of life, but it's throughout their life.
And that's a good indicator that maybe something more going on.
Right. So you can talk to the kids' friends, maybe their teachers, those kinds of things. And at the same time, we think, well, if you get the measures, we can look at that and see, okay, so now it is usually happening in the winter time. It is cyclical. Perhaps it is seasonal.
Okay.
So that's how we can think about it that way.
So, in kind of putting questions together for you today, you know, I looked at some of it and said there were some risk factors for seasonal affective disorder. Kind of what are some of the risk factors when you think about getting sad?
Sure. Well, I think the way that we think about most disorders and diseases, there's environmental factors for sure, but the one that we usually see driving mental health disorders is genetics. So heritability. And so if we have kids that might have parents, so like the closer relationship that they have with the person who has a mental health disorder, the risk goes up. Okay. So if a parent might be depressed or have depression or also has SAD or what have you, the kid might also have the likelihood of having that as well. Okay. It just goes up exponentially. Yeah. So that's where we really think of the risk. But in terms of like kids that are in an environment, say like in Seattle, and it's raining a lot of the time, and they're not able to go outside, and they're really being affected by low sunlight, perhaps in the environment itself, they might have that risk.
So external factors.
Yeah. Right. And the other thing to think about when we talk about heritability and environment, if we have twins that have inherited the same exact genes from their parents, so both parents have depression, the kids both inherited that gene, let's just say that that's what happened, and we put these twins into two different households. One household has lots of resources, parents who are effectively coping with problems, effectively modeling coping skills, those kinds of things. Maybe that kid might not express the depression. They might still have depression, but they're not expressing it because they haven't been exposed to a stressor. Right. Then you have a kid that might be living in a very difficult, impoverished area. They had a traumatic event occur, or something else happened to them that then now it's called the diathesis stress model, which is a fancy word meaning exposure to stress with the genetics. Then now that gene is being expressed. So now I'm having depression.
And that's when you say it kind of almost doubles, triples, whatever it is, the opportunity to have that.
Yeah. The high risk. I mean, that's what we kind of think about.
Yeah.
So that's how it's a really broken down, and there's more to it than that, clearly.
Oh, yeah.
But just for our audience to kind of get a sense of what that might mean in terms of heritability of mental health disorders. Yeah.
So now that we kind of know about it, know what the risk factors are, let's talk about how do you come out of it? How do you deal with it on a day-to-day basis? If someone will come to you, if they're trying to deal with it by themselves, kind of what kind of strategies can they take?
So let's say once they went through and had an appropriate intake by a mental health professional and were given the diagnosis, that person would then provide them with a treatment plan. So here's some options. They might list several different types of therapies, and then the individual and the family can come together with the mental health provider to decide which one works best for them in terms of their resources and time and those kinds of things. Yeah. And so some of the major one that we usually use is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And that therapy is usually trying to help parents and children understand emotions and how they affect our thoughts and how they affect our behavior. And it's not just one way. It can also be like a behavior occurs, and that impacts my thoughts, and then it impacts my emotions, those kinds of things. So we're just trying to help them understand that, while also challenging cognitive distortions, or a fancy word for inappropriate or ineffective thinking, catastrophic thoughts, like, oh my gosh, I failed this test, I'm never going to go to college. That's not accurate. You probably can still get to college, but we might have that kind of way of thinking. Yeah. So we're going to challenge those thoughts and try to come up with more realistic kinds of thoughts. And then in terms of the behavior component, we want to develop behavioral contingencies. So if you are feeling sadness or something like that, you want to withdraw from your friends and family, let's do the opposite to the emotion action. So I'll ask you, Peter, if I'm feeling depressed and want to withdraw from family, what would be the opposite of that?
Get more family together.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Right. Hang out with my family. Yeah. If you're anxious and you want to avoid like speaking or public speaking or something, and you want to avoid that, what would be the opposite to that?
Try to get more.
Approach it. Do it. Yeah. So that way we're thinking I'm going to do the opposite to what the emotion is telling me. And so it's goal-directed behavior, not mood-directed behavior. Oh, so that's what CBT does. And that's there's more to it than that, but that's what we kind of usually talk about. Okay. And then with all of that said, maybe the symptoms are still occurring and they're just still having difficulty. We might then use the light box.
I heard about those now. It's so funny. It's like, a strategy to fix it is a light box, so I'm interested to hear more about that.
So it's usually about like a 1.5 by 1.5 box that lets out UV light. Okay. And so some will argue that they want an hour to 3 hours of exposure to this thing, depending upon how much light the city has, for example. So like in Seattle, they're usually about an 1.5 to 2 hour session in front of the box. Yeah. And the UV light exposure will help decrease that amount of melatonin. So then therefore they're going to have less fatigue and those kinds of things, and more serotonin because it does impact that as well. So they're being exposed to that light box while they're also doing CBT. So you're still, because we still got to It's just like using medication only. Maybe they're still having those thoughts.
Yeah.
So I still need to give them coping skills when those thoughts come up.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of therapy that we talk about. And then let's say if those things are still not working, then we might want to then include a psychiatric medication, like a mood stabilizer or antidepressant or something like that.
Depending on how severe it might be.
Yeah, exactly. Like if the kid is really having some challenges and they need to be hospitalized for fear of self-harm or something else, then it might be really important to strategize with a medication to keep the kid safe. And then sometimes when people are really depressed, their ability to kind of come to sessions on time, do their homework, will be affected. And so sometimes it's more helpful to start with a medication so they're able to attend sessions. Because again, with depression, you're not going to be able to concentrate very well because you're tired, you're anxious, you're what have you. You're not feeling well. You're not going to be able to attend. And so sometimes it can be really, really, really challenging.
So again, in putting this together, I love doing these because it allows me to kind of just do some research on the topics. And so as I was doing research on this, I came across a site that talked about the CDC questioning the validity of seasonal affective disorder.
Right.
In 2016, they did some kind of an analysis of some survey data that said there were no links between what they said was depression and seasonality or sunlight exposure.
Right.
So talk a little bit about this, because as I started digging into it, it literally, I could not find if it was debunked, if it was, where is that? Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I did. I had a chance to take a look at that article. And so it was actually some researchers that were looking at the CDC report that had something not to do with specifically for SAD, but they were looking at just like overall statistics for depression. So the measure was specifically, I think, 8 questions about major depressive disorder, not specifically issues with SAD. So they're not asking people, is it seasonally? When did this happen when you felt sad? They're just asking overall, are you feeling sad? And it was throughout a year, so they're kind of trying to extrapolate that information. And so the researchers kind of said, we don't know for sure. And actually, most research will say that we need to do continued research because we don't have the exact answers to everything, because there's certainly mechanisms in the brain that we really don't fully understand. So yes, is it a real thing? I mean, I think we recognize that there are issues with sunlight exposure and these chemical systems in the body that are impacted by them. So I think the question is still out there. I think it's still
being looked at, right?
Yeah. I mean, the light boxes do work. We see these symptoms decrease. We see people getting better. So if it's exposure to UV light from the therapeutic research that we're doing, then therefore it must be something that is there that we can actually continue to do. And if it works, why not keep doing it?
Right, exactly. Well, and one of the other things too that I saw is there were some things that we're trying to make connections between, and I think this kind of segues back into what you talked about, where there's risk factors. So there were some connections between seasonal affective disorder and bipolar disorder.
Right.
So my guess is that if you have bipolar disorder, that SAD would be a lot easier to get or to experience, but maybe that's not the case. And so I did a little bit looking at that, but I wanted to ask you about that.
Well, I think what they were talking about was, so what we might see is maybe a person who has bipolar disorder, both manic and hypomanic episodes or depressive episodes, that maybe in the wintertime they express those hypomanic or depressive episodes, and in the spring they express those manic episodes. Well, most people, I think we can see this in our own lives. It's just not significant enough to diagnose. Where I'm feeling more happy in the spring, I'm feeling more motivated to do things. Right. Things are thawing out.
Right.
I can walk to my car and I don't have to use an ice scraper, all those kind of things. So you're feeling more excited about life, perhaps. So, but for them, it's not to the extreme where maybe they're doing high-risk behaviors or grandiose thinking, those kinds of problems with manic episodes, true manic episodes. But so it's really kind of like what people are seeing is maybe that in itself is cyclical. And so is it seasonal affective disorder with hypo and hypermanic episodes? It's still out there. So is there a relationship to it? I'm not clear on that, because there are certainly people that have bipolar disorder that is not during the seasonal. They're not affected by it. It's just kind of throughout the year they're feeling that way. And there's certainly people that have what we call mixed episodes, where they have both hypo and hypermanic episodes that are kind of like throughout the day sometimes.
Ebb and flow. But
it's certainly some people that have it more extreme, where it lasts maybe a month or two for each of those episodes. And those can happen, I think, when we think about it seasonally, are usually towards the end of fall and sometimes in late summer. So some people will say that they're having like more episodes of those kinds of things. So that's something to think about too.
Okay. Guy knows what he's talking about, as do many of the psychologists, psychiatrists at Barrow Neurological Institute at Phoenix Children's. So that's all I had for today. I think I really wanted to get out there what seasonal affective disorder was. Happy holidays to you.
You too, and happy holidays to everyone else out there.
Yeah.
One quick thing though.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just thought of something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you asked about like risk and like prevention and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So if we think that our kids might have SAD, an initiative or a thing that you can do is develop a coping ahead plan. So in the fall, if I know my kid is impacted by winter, maybe during that time period before winter even begins, I'm going to expose my kid to some behavioral activation things, which is a fancy word for more pleasurable activities. Or I might provide supportive language to my kid or model effective coping strategies when I'm feeling upset or something. So literally talking out loud in front of my kid when I'm experiencing some sort of difficult emotion, so they're seeing me model those behaviors, so if they themselves experience it, they're also kind of able to.
So being proactive, basically, as you know you're coming into that season, basically, right?
Exactly. So just kind of maybe prevent the extreme version of it than the previous year. For
the crazy cycle, as they say, right? Yeah. Well, thank you again. That was actually great.
Just wanted to say that.
No, that's excellent. So thank you again. Happy holidays. Happy New Year to you. We'll have a lot more Phoenix Children's Live coming into 2018. We'll have more with Dr. Kellison as well. So thank you again, and enjoy the season.
Thank you, Jenny.